Alrighty, we are live here with my dear friend Mindy Uranga, who we've just known each other, I don't even know how many years. Welcome to all of you. I know that this is live and some of you may join us now, but it is being recorded, so we do have a lot of people that'll look later on. And today's topic is one that's a little bit tough. Right? Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah, a little tough, but boy, in light of just the events that have been unfolding over the last year, I would say, with sexual scandals in general, and then what's been going on with the latest events with the gymnastics doctor, and just I think it's so important that we have this conversation, this discussion. This is something, Mindy, that I know has been very dear, I wouldn't say dear, but near to your heart for a long time.
Actually, yeah, near and dear.
Yeah,
I always say near and dear. Yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story and how that unfolded.
Okay, well, I originally started unmasking when I decided I was going to retire. I was sitting on the board of directors for the Child Abuse Prevention Center, and while I was sitting on the board, I realized that, you know, while I enjoyed sitting on the board, really what I needed to do was kind of get more in the trenches. So I asked them what would be a good fit, and they talked about CAST. And said that, you know, that's really where most of the trauma happens. So I went to be a volunteer advocate at CAST. And CAST is where kids go to give their forensic interview, whether they've been a witness to homicide or sexually molested or even kidnapped. And while I was there, and I had an opportunity to watch numerous forensic interviews. And that's literally like you see on TV, where you have a child on one side and a, you know, district attorney, whatever agencies are involved with that double pane glass mirror, and the kids are really telling their story.
Wow.
And what I realized was that every one of those kids had exactly the same story I did, and that was that they were being molested by someone that they knew, loved, and trusted.
Wow.
And so it became
Say that
really,
again, because that's so critical. Yeah.
Every child, there was not one child.
Wow.
And we'll talk about stranger danger in a minute, but not one child had been molested by a stranger. Every child was molested by someone they knew, loved, and trusted. Wow. So it then became my mission to educate people about the grooming behaviors, to really stop it before it happens.
Yes.
Because we have so many amazing programs for kids once it's happened.
Yeah.
But what are we doing to stop it?
Right.
So that really became my inspiration and my drive to start unmasking.
Wow.
Having been a survivor of sexual abuse myself, by numerous perpetrators, it really became a mission to make sure that no other child had to go through this.
I mean, that was something, Mindy, that was so profound to me, was as I was doing a little bit of research for today, that this is preventable. This is preventable.
It's very preventable. There are once you learn to recognize the patterns of behaviors of child molesters, it's very preventable because they become so obvious.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but before we go there, I just wanted to, you know, some of you may be wondering, what does this have to do with Beauty Matters?
Right.
And as I was reflecting on that, there was an interview I did several weeks ago with an artist. Her name was Julia Hayashi, and she talked about the connection between beauty and justice.
Right.
And so I think there is this huge connection there. Talk to us a little bit about why should we care about this? How does it tie into living beautiful lives, especially for us as women who want to be empowered in that way?
Well, I think one thing that I can say is that as horrible as being a victim of child molestation is that there is beauty in the end. You can turn that pain into purpose. Yes. That you don't have to be a victim, that you can be a survivor.
Yes.
And so I have a very beautiful life, despite the fact that I've had multiple perpetrators. Yeah. And I don't live as a victim. And I think that's really where I find the beauty in it, is that there is redemption and that you can survive it.
Yeah. And again, I know that you too are a believer in the same way. I mean, isn't that the gospel message, right?
Absolutely, yes.
That God takes just the most painful parts that we think are, are death in and of
Yes.
itself, and He resurrects and makes it beautiful.
Yes.
So, and you're such a wonderful testimony of
Thank
that, and that you're using this to help other people is really fabulous. So let's go ahead and delve in.
Okay.
What is child sexual abuse? Let's define it.
Okay. Well, the definition of child sexual abuse is anyone that's 18 or actually, I'm totally I got caught up on something, and I was just brain farting. My mind was taking me somewhere, but it's a sexual act against anyone that's a minor, and that can be between an adult and a minor, or an adult who is perpetrating a person who's disabled, or maybe mentally impaired, or between two children even.
Yes.
And usually that's if one child is larger than the other, or if there's any type of force or coercion against that child.
Yeah.
So that's really the definition.
Yeah.
Is a sex act between an adult and a minor, or
Right.
between two minors when one is older, larger,
Right.
using force.
Well, and that was, again, as I was reading, it's not necessarily penetration. There's a lot that's considered sexual abuse before there may or may not be penetration. Right, on that.
Absolutely. In fact, there's what we call like non-contact abuse, and then the physical abuse. And typically we all think about the physical
Yes.
act.
Yeah.
But non-contact is typically the way that a perpetrator, or what a perpetrator will use most often for the longest period of time to really start desensitizing that child. And that could be, showing them pornography,
Yes, yeah.
or talking to them very sexually explicit,
Yeah.
maybe asking them, to share their fantasies, or sharing their fantasies with
Right.
the child, or
Wow.
taking, pictures. We hear about, pictures all the time.
Right.
Those are all non-contact ways that are actually sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the physical that we all know about. And, this is not a comfortable, like we said,
Right,
not
right.
a comfortable thing to hear. But, the physical things like, penetration and oral copulation and those types of things are
Yes.
really the more physical that we really tend to kind of focus on.
Yeah. Right.
When really it does typically start with the non-contact.
Right. And that's another, I think, kind of maybe misunderstanding, is that you have these strangers that grab your kids and sexually molest them, but really it is this process, isn't it, of desensitization. That's a hard word to say. Yeah, long word to say.
It really is, and we always say that, grooming, and that's what we'll be talking about today, grooming is not an event, it's a process.
Yes.
And grooming can take a year. It can take months
Yeah.
before the perpetrator feels really comfortable actually performing a sex act on a
Right.
child. They want to make sure that the child's going to be able to keep secrets and,
Right.
do certain other things before they actually physically assault
Wow.
that child.
Wow, that is, really, really interesting. So, as I was doing my research, I read actually it was shocking to me quote, because again, as parents, we think about all of those dangers out there. We think of all the illnesses that kids could get and all of that. But the quote that I read was that child sexual abuse is likely the most prevalent health problem children face, with the most serious array of consequences.
That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Talk
pretty
to us
amazing.
about
Well,
that. Yeah, about that. Yeah.
The numbers are 1 in 4 girls
Yeah. Wow.
and 1 in 6 boys
Yeah.
will be molested before their 18th birthday.
Wow.
Now, let me put that's over 20% of our
Yeah.
child's population.
Wow.
Let's put that in perspective,
Yeah,
because
that
a lot
is
of times
amazing.
when we hear numbers, they just kind of go in one ear and out the other.
Yes,
But
yeah.
here's a real visual for you. The Centers for Disease and Control estimated this year, and actually the last few years, that anywhere between 5 and 20% of the population was going to come down with the flu.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
think about for a moment, every time, even this year, that somebody, maybe you were going to meet with somebody
Right.
and they had to cancel because they had the flu,
Right.
or your kids couldn't make it to school because they had the flu, or
Right.
half the kids in the class had the flu.
Right.
Imagine for a moment if
Wow.
instead of that person calling and saying, "Sorry, Karen, I can't do the interview, I got the flu," they called you and said, I was molested last night.
Yes.
That only represents a
Wow.
handful
Wow.
of the number of kids that are being molested.
Because we really, I mean, I'm guessing that there's a part of that that is hard to really quantify accurately because children don't talk, right?
That's right. That's right. Less than 30% of kids will ever disclose.
Yeah.
And more often than not, they say about 70% of those kids that do disclose, of the 30%, disclosed on accident.
Wow. Yeah.
It didn't come out on purpose.
Wow.
They confide in a friend or something, and then it was found out.
Wow. So really what we're saying is that the statistics could be much higher. Even
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There isn't any real mathematical solution. We know that, not many kids will disclose.
Right. So going back to that quote then, what are some of the consequences that are common, like in children that have been molested?
Well, I can tell you, and as an adult survivor, I'm 58 years old now, and I still suffer from consequences of it. Even though I'm not a victim, there are still things that play out in my own life that affect, the relationship between my husband and I, or actually my experience in the relationship, whether he's aware of it or not. But typically, kids will could suffer from depression or eating disorders or, bedwetting, anxiety, a multitude of ways that it can play out. It's so different. Every child is so different, but there is definitely an effect.
Yeah.
Definitely an effect. Sometimes, there's physical effects.
Right.
That's not real common. God does give, little kids, the bodies, the ability to heal very quickly. Right. So don't expect to see those physical. Yeah. But obviously, if you ever saw a tear or, multiple infections in a child, those would definitely be signs, things to pay attention to. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, one thing again, just as I'm listening, what I'm thinking about is it's such a violation, not just physically like a disease, but emotionally and spiritually, and how that child sees itself. And in some ways, the perpetrator is just using that child, disregarding all of that, and just really looking at that person from a strictly utilitarian, right? Just
Absolutely.
completely use that child without any regard to that entire being. And we are so integrated, huh?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I know you've had, just an incredible healing journey to be so self-aware of all of those things. And thank you for being so vulnerable.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's go ahead and move sort of into the other side of that. Let's talk about these molesters or perpetrators. But before we go there, one thing that really struck me was why do you think there is such silence when it comes to talking about this? And not just from the children, but from those that are supposed to be protecting them.
Right. Well, obviously the silence from the children comes from shame, guilt, fear. And from the adults, what I find is a lot of it is fear. It's fear. People don't want, it's still so very taboo. People don't want to talk about it. Yeah. And the reason people don't want to talk about it is because, again, it's going to be someone you know, love, and trust. Yeah. And who wants to even think about that? We don't want to even believe that that's even a possibility for us. Right. And that's one thing that I always say is if you don't think that this can be going on within your inner circle, your sphere of influence, then you're really likely to miss it.
Wow.
Because it is going to be someone you know, love, and trust. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so difficult for people to want to talk about it.
Well, and again, part of this pattern is these perpetrators move into places like churches, like youth centers, like being a coach, or where there is sort of this relationship of trust that already exists, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just realized I didn't turn my phone off. It didn't happen. But yes, if a child molester is not already working in an industry, whether that's a police officer, a child photographer, a pediatrician, don't think that just because they're professionals that they don't molest. Several of my perpetrators were professional people. Yeah. But if they don't already work with children, they're going to find ways to volunteer and to put themselves to be able to gain access to those kids.
Yeah.
So they're going to be your coaches. They're going to be your youth pastors, your softball coach.
Yes.
They're going to be people that are putting themselves in situations where they can have a lot of access to kids.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing as a mom, because we're not trained to necessarily, we need to give ourselves permission to be suspicious, right?
Right.
To listen to those red flags, because we're like, oh no, that's the youth pastor. He wouldn't do anything like that. And even the fear of, if I open my mouth and I'm wrong.
Yes.
Right?
That's the biggest fear. Nobody wants to falsely accuse somebody, especially someone that you may admire, trust, is like a friend to the family, as part of the family.
Yeah.
Could even be, or, oftentimes is a family member.
Yeah.
So, nobody wants to believe that for a moment.
Right. Well, and again, one thing I read that was really made a lot of sense to me was there's a difference between saying, I'm suspicious, please check into this, versus he's doing it. It's like, it's much easier to say, guy, I just have this bad feeling, there's some red flags, versus this, he's a child molester. So
Exactly.
Give yourself permission, I guess I would say, right, to voice concern.
That's right. Err on the side of what's going to protect the child.
Yes.
And I always say also, again, the last thing anyone wants to do is falsely accuse somebody.
Yes.
So it's really going to take a lot of hits on your gut before you even start thinking that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
We're pretty likely to let a few little things slide by.
Yes.
But it's going to take several hits to your gut before you even start suspecting. So once you start suspecting, you need to act on that.
Yeah. So talk to us about, that's a great lead-in. So what are the grooming patterns? What are some of those that we should be aware of where it's like, okay, red flag, red flag?
Right. Well, anytime we'll go over what they are, and then I'll maybe give a couple stories to kind of illustrate, because that's how I learn best, when I can see kind of a picture. But anytime, there's somebody, an adult.
I want to make sure you're in the camera.
Anytime there's an adult who's, spending way more time with kids than adults, that should be a red flag. Somebody who, is really into all the trends of the kids. This could be, and I'm just going to say youth pastor, but somebody who, knows all the lingo, dresses like a child, dresses like kids, knows all the music, even knows most of the words to the music. And this is somebody who often you'll hear the parents say, pay attention when you're hearing these things on the news when a child comes out, and you'll immediately hear the parents going, there's no way, he's so great with the kids. In fact, he's just like one of the kids, he's so great. And, he'll tutor them for free. This is someone who's spending a lot of time with kids. Somebody who's having the kids keep secrets.
Interesting.
Or maybe showering that child with gifts, and those could look like, a phone or a laptop or shoes that you can't afford to buy for your child, and they're just doing that as a favor for you because they know you can't do it. And that's a lot of ways, that they'll gain access and kind of win over the parent as well, because they're actually doing you some favors. So when somebody's doing favors for you,
it's hard to accuse them,
it's really hard to accuse, and sadly, sometimes those favors kind of outweigh your suspicions, with the child. So let me give you an illustration, because secrets is one of the biggest things that child molesters, that's one of the greatest ways that they kind of feel out a child as a potential victim. And secrets they start out very small and very trivial. For example, let's say that you hire Billy to watch Johnny. And you tell Billy that, Johnny has to be in bed by 9, and by the way, no sweets, because, he'll bounce off the wall. And then you head out. And so, before you know it, Billy says to Johnny, you know what, I think it's ridiculous that you can't have sweets. In fact, he may have brought something himself, or offers the child something at home and just says, you know what, it's just going to be our little secret. We won't tell anyone. And as small and silly as that secret seems, what Billy is actually waiting for is to see if he's going to get a call the next day.
From the mom.
From the mom
that
saying,
totally
hey,
makes sense.
I thought I made it clear that he wasn't allowed to have that, and he told me Because what this perpetrator is looking for is what kind of communication does this child have with his parents? Can he keep a secret?
Yes.
So the next time when Billy babysits, he may expose him to pornography and say, you know what, you're going to need to learn this from somebody. We're good friends. It's just our little secret.
Right.
And then the next time he may say, you can stay up till 11, but this time we're going to watch what I want to watch, and it's just our little secret. And before you know it, Johnny has broken so many rules that by the time it turns into any physical molestation,
oh my gosh, yeah. He doesn't even feel like he could go to mom.
How can he tell? Because he is going to be in so much trouble because of all the things that he's done.
Right.
So the likelihood of him disclosing is slim to none.
Wow.
So teaching kids, at a very young age, and it's never too late, but teaching kids to not keep secrets is so critical. I've read interview after interview and spoken to pedophiles, and if a child can't keep a secret, they're going to move on.
Okay.
They're going to move
so
on.
it's almost like they screen them to look for that compliant child
That's
is
right.
going to be likely to
That's
do
right.
that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They want to make sure that child can keep secrets. That's so critical.
Yeah. Are there any other kind of patterns or things to look for?
Anytime there's, in fact, my mentor told me about her husband. When I talk about how kids, an adult spending more time with kids, she talked about how her ex-husband, when their neighborhood would get together for special occasions, her husband was the one who was always, the adults are in the house having a glass of wine. Her husband would be the one in the backyard entertaining all the kids,
Interesting.
And this is so common, rough playing, tickling games with the kids. He was the one who initiated all that, while all the other wives are in the house, of course, saying how amazing her husband is because, he's so great with the kids. But you really need to kind of step back, and anytime somebody wants to spend more time with your kids than you do, first of all, that should be a red flag.
That should be a red flag.
That should be a red flag in and of itself.
Right.
Anytime on, but when you kind of step back, now just because he's out playing with kids doesn't make him a child molester. But this is somebody who, again, when the kids get home from school, he's the one out on the street teaching them how to play ball, and just a lot of times, think about your own husband. And how much, it's hard to get our own husbands to spend time with our own kids.
That is true. That
Really.
is true.
Really, let alone other people's kids.
Yes.
So, another example, I was in Missouri. My husband was going on a mountain biking trip. And it was a race. And so the other guy who was racing, he and my husband went out to practice. So I went with his wife to his daughter's last soccer game. Well, we're walking on the field, and here comes this older man, and he's lugging a cooler, and he's got all these things, and the kids literally swarm to this guy.
And are you saying
And again,
red flag?
So immediately I'm like, that's really interesting. I'm like, who is that? And of course she's like, Mindy, you think everyone, and I'm like, no, I'm just noticing. Is he is he the coach or something?
Yeah.
And she said, no, he used to be a coach. Now he just comes to watch the other kids play. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. Where's your husband?
Yeah.
Where's your husband? This is your daughter's last game. Yeah. Where's your husband? Just pay attention. It doesn't, again, pay attention to these things.
Yes.
Give
yourself permission.
That's right.
To pay attention.
Just pay attention, And then, of course, this is the guy who afterwards invited a few kids to go get ice cream. Now, again, it could just be a really nice guy. And that's what's really sad is that child molesters really, they bank on the great reputations of teachers and all those people because that's what makes them look so great. They're gonna look better than the average person. Yeah, they just are.
Yeah. Wow, that just makes it so complicated and so tough, right?
It is. Yeah. It really is complicated.
Yeah, and I just think that as moms and dads, give yourself permission to be discerning and.
Right.
I know, Mindy, I've shared my example where I had a son who went away from camp. And
I was hoping we were going to bring that up because we didn't discuss it, and I was saying, but I use your example all the time because it's so typical, and I would love for you to share what you
I had a son who went to a church camp, a very well-known church camp, and the counselors weren't all from our church because our church didn't have enough. They had to share it with another church. And so for whatever reason, my son ended up in the cabin with a counselor from another church. And we actually were new in this church, so he wasn't super well connected with the kids.
Right.
And he came home from camp, and of course I said, how's camp? And he kept talking about his friend. His friend, I don't even remember what his name was, Joey. My friend Joey this, my friend Joey that. And the more he's talking, there's just something in my spirit that just is not settling right. And I think that's it. And then I kind of said, so tell me about Joey. Is he like your age? Oh, no, Mommy, he's kind of like your age. And, you know, and then again, I don't know if you as parents have been in that situation where you can just kind of feel that
Yes.
panic, you know, coming up, and it just did not sit right with me. And so again, you know, he's like, oh, and Mommy, he wants to get to know you and
Right.
all of this. And of course,
Wasn't he going to take him camping and
yes,
fishing? And all
yeah,
that?
he wanted to, and he wants to see me again. And so right away, you know, of course, I called the church and said, I don't know, but this is a huge red flag, and you need to check into this guy.
Right.
And I, of course, explained to our son that, you know, this probably isn't going to be the best relationship.
Right.
And we were nipping this in the bud, you know, right away.
Right.
But it was literally like
Right.
that thing. And that's one thing I wanted to talk, you know, maybe Mindy talk a little bit. The interesting thing was this was during a time where my husband actually had an exchange program, and he was gone for long periods. So I was, you know, the mommy at home.
Right.
Because the statistics also are that there are certain family situations where they also seek out those kind of kids because they're more at risk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and initially people usually think, oh, it's lower class people that they're seeking out, and that's not necessarily true. You know, we talked about 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, and kids that come from single family homes.
Yeah.
Or homes where there's addictive behavior, whether that's alcohol or drug abuse, those kids are 20 times more likely.
Wow.
20 times more likely to be molested. So, yes, perpetrators are looking for needs.
Yeah.
They're looking for ways to fill a void within a family.
Yes.
That could be a family that is very well off, and both parents are working all the time,
Yep.
and they don't have time for that child.
Right.
And so now this guy's going to come along and be the best friend and be someone that this child can confide
Yes.
in. Or it's the single mom.
Yes.
They're very, very huge targets.
Sure.
And the reason they're targets is because they're usually very overworked. They're stressed out. They're more willing to accept help.
Yes.
You know, they have usually a lot of guilt that they're not providing that manly figure,
Right.
and so they're more willing to let their child go camping
Right.
or fishing or, you know, do those kinds of things, or have a live-in boyfriend. You know, that's typically, you know, they
Yes.
can't support themselves, and so they've got somebody moving in. And a lot of times perpetrators are looking for those ready-made families.
Yeah.
So they come in, they gain access to those kids, and then, you know, a lot of times the threats that I hear, you know, what the kids are hearing is, you know, if you want food on the table, if you want a roof over your head,
Wow.
you know, you can't tell.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's, you know, if you're well off or not well off. They're looking for really a void within that family, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Communication, you know, you're too busy.
Yeah.
A child with really low self-esteem
Yeah.
who needs a friend.
Yep. Yeah.
So it can be anybody, really.
Yeah. Wow. Coming just full circle here. So let me just see. Do you feel like, is there anything else that you feel like is really important to cover, kind of as we're just I know where we are going with this, Mindy. So you have suspicions that something has happened to a child.
Right.
Talk to us about how do you approach that situation, both to the child and then
Right.
also
Right.
kind of to the, you know, to reporting it or to the person.
Well, I can tell you from my own experience, and again, we talked about how kids aren't going to just tell you.
Right.
And I can remember, and I don't know if they do it anymore, but I can remember as a young child and even a teenager where people would come to your class and speak and say if anything's happening,
Right.
you know, you can come up and tell, and you don't. But I can only imagine that if somebody would have come up to me and
Yes.
said, "Are you okay? Do you feel safe? Do you need help?"
Yeah.
that those would be opportunities. You never want to, you know, obviously you don't want to go up to a child and say, are you being molested?
Right.
Or any type of leading questions at all. But you want to just ask really open-end questions to a child.
Right.
And if a child ever discloses to you, then it's really, really important to not overreact. Right. Because, you know, especially, again, remember, it's going to be someone you know, love, and trust. Yeah. So your first instinct is going to be, oh, my God.
Yeah.
Or to say, what else did he do? Or something like that.
Right.
But you have to stay really calm and just tell the child that you believe them, and ask leading questions like, you know, what else happened, or where were you, or something like that. Because if you overreact, you're likely to shut that child down. Yeah. Because a lot of them not disclosing is because they don't want to cause you pain.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, they don't want to hurt the adult.
Right. I can't even imagine the relief that maybe a child would feel if an adult just came to them and said, are you safe? Do you feel safe?
Right. I think about that. I think about that.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just think for even us who are, you know, safe people, like, be that safe person for people. Be alert. Be aware. You know, be there for that mom that might need help, especially for those of us in the church, you know. And although I was thinking as you were talking, the interesting thing is, I mean, even in our church, and I go to a relatively small church, we now are mandated, people who come in and join churches, I think it's okay to ask, what are the safety things you have in place?
I think it's imperative that you ask, what are the policies and procedures? What do you have in place to protect my child from being sexually molested? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with asking that question. Yeah. And I think it's almost foolish to not ask that question.
Yeah. You just can't assume anymore.
No.
And that's truly.
No, you can't.
I mean, it's a sad thing, but your children come first.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, kids, I can't stress enough that kids are not going to tell. Yeah. And I really think as the adults that we need to take that responsibility off the kids to tell.
Yes.
Because they're not going to. Yeah. We need to be the eyes and the ears. We need to be the ones protecting them and take that responsibility off of the kids.
And I love that. In fact, the quote that I put as I was kind of letting you know what we were going to be talking about today is this, and it's going full circle here. This is preventable, but it's going to take adults who are the ears and the eyes for their children and who have the courage to be wrong. It's better to be wrong.
Better to be wrong. And, you know, the whole purpose of unmasking is to really, really surround every child with adults that are knowledgeable, that are informed, so that they don't have to be a victim of a sexual predator. Yes. That's the whole purpose. And to really, as a society, you know, that no child would ever be a victim of sexual molestation or abuse because of adults that were either ignorant or apathy.
Apathy, apathy, So tell us about unmasking and the services that you offer.
Okay, so it's in an interesting kind of a transition right now. Unmasking is actually, I'm being led into something else. I don't know yet what that will be, but I'm actually passing the torch over to one of my biggest mentors, Diane Cranley, who runs TALK, and that's TAALK.org, and that stands for Talking About Abuse Liberates Kids.
Love that.
Yeah. So she's been doing this work for many, many years. I would really encourage everyone to go to her website. Unmasking will be handing over the torch. Hopefully, we're going to be fully combined by April 1st, or in April, which is actually Child Abuse Awareness Month. Oh, okay. So it's perfect. But she has an incredible website that's already up. You can go onto that website, and there's actual free training on there for every parent, and it goes over all the grooming behaviors. I could only, touch on a little bit because we could talk about this for hours. But she has a really, really great presentation on there that you can watch. All the resources that you need, if you suspect that your child's being molested or another child, what are the resources? You know, who do you contact?
Right.
All those would be found on that resource.
Yeah. So the resources on Talk, are there any other kind of books or anything that you recommend?
Yes. In fact, the one book that you brought up, The Socially Skilled Child Molester.
Yes. Yeah.
It's an excellent book because what that book does is it really kind of opens your eyes to really how conniving, how it's really right in front of our faces.
Yes.
And what it really looks like. That's a great
Yeah,
book.
that was, in fact, I had a quote from there that said, and this was a very, very powerful quote, and I'll read it here really quick.
Okay.
It was, child molesters gravitate to those people who are most likely to be too polite to fend them off, too shy and anxious to tell them to leave, too dependent. And the book is actually Dr. Carla Van Dam. But these people are too dependent to be assertive and too impressed by rank, power, status, or money to do the right thing. And that really made me think about the gymnastics doctor.
Yes.
You know, so child molesters deliberately associate with adults who cannot address these issues. They seek out adults who worry about hurting people's feelings. They charm adults who do not believe it could happen. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I thought that was very powerful. So again, the name of that book is The Socially Skilled Child Molester by Dr. Carla Van Dam. And again, really important, I think, probably not the most pleasant reading, but
Right.
again,
Excellent. It's really an excellent book. There's other websites. Stop It Now is a great website. A lot of education on there, a lot of resources. I did a lot of training through them, and they're really a great organization as well as far as looking for signs and what you can do.
And Mindy, you actually volunteered before you started unmasking. If someone really has it laid on their heart, are there opportunities for people to volunteer? I know it's a sensitive area.
Yes.
So
in fact, let me pull this up because I got from Diane this morning, Diane Cranley, and that. Again,
and you're in Orange County, California.
Yeah,
just so
I'm in
people
Orange
know.
County.
Yeah.
I asked her. I told her we'd be doing this, and I asked her to be praying about what it is, you know, how we can help unmasking. It's going to transition to that, and how we can help talk. And here's what she said. Let me get my glasses. Okay, Diane said, she said, I've thought and prayed about it, and here's what we need. I have more content that's not made it to our website due to lack of human and financial resources. We want to get this valuable information out to the public. So here are the two things that would be of help. Number one or two volunteers who are comfortable with using a variety of technical applications to edit web pages, blogs, social media, audio, and video. They don't need to be a programmer, but a little more savvy in app using.
Okay.
And then the other one, of course, is donations, any kind of financial help for her to hire the people to.
And she is a full 401c nonprofit as well for tax deduction.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
She's
and we can post it. 501, sorry, not 401. Or that's a 401k.
501c3, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so it's all, you know, if you make a donation, it's all completely tax deductible.
And we'll put that link for Talk then down below if anybody feels led or has skills, lives in the Orange County area, and maybe has skills to volunteer a little bit of time. So just in closing here, what is a quote that you can leave
My
us
favorite quote that I had on my business cards was actually from Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And that is that our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter.
Oh, that is,
and really, child molesters are counting on our silence.
Yeah.
And our silence really enables child molesters to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Wow. Mindy.
So we need to speak up.
Speak up. Speak up. It's better to be that obnoxious voice than to be silent. That's for sure.
Right.
In any matter of justice, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a blessing. You know I adore you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for the work that you're doing on behalf of children everywhere.
You're so welcome.
Thank you all for joining us.